Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. Humans, when motivated, are an unstoppable force in the universe. But today, we'll see just how far Captain Veer will go for his crew, pushing himself both physically and mentally. Check if you're subscribed today, because if you're not, do it. It is totally free. But now, let's get into the story. From the Intergalactic Journal of Mechanics and Biology. They say that a single human once ran for 80 hours without stopping to sleep. He covered a distance of roughly 350 miles during that time. Another one managed to run 3,100 miles in a span of 41 days at a relative speed of less than 5 miles an hour. The speed of humans pales in comparison to the other apex predators of their planet. The spotted cheetah can run up to 76 miles per hour, but can only sustain that for approximately 1,500 feet. The best bred and trained horses of their planet may be able to run 100 miles a day, but many who attempt this feat never finish. Despite its relative speed, the human can sustain a relative pace of 4 miles an hour for a little over 3 Earth solar cycles without rest. Keep in mind that this is not an examination of average ability. Once thought to be the most endurance-evolved species in the galaxy, the Rundi can only run for an hour at the speed of 15 miles per hour. But in a long-distance race with a human, they may find themselves slowly outmatched. First, they outpace the human easily. They grow slowly tired, they fall to a slow walking speed, they try to maintain, but their body overheats, and they need to stop to cool down. Eventually, the steady footsteps of the approaching human, who doesn't need pauses, converge and then pass ahead to recede into the distance. Compared to most creatures, the human has a few advantages. Bipedal in nature, they can carry objects with them as they run, like food and water. The arches in their feet act like shocks and springs to decrease shock. The feet are oriented straight ahead, and their toes are shortened to decrease the mechanical work of the foot. Spring-like tendons and ligaments aid them as they run. A narrow waist that can pivot allows for the swimming of arms during running action. A heightened sense of balance and movement keeps them on a straight course and allows for their head to remain steady as they go. About 20 miles of energy can be stored in the muscles themselves. Additionally, one of the largest muscles in the body, the gluteus maximus, is not engaged during a brisk walk, but during a run. But the biggest factor is their ability to cool through sweat. As far as we know, humans and some of their earthly counterparts are the only creatures in the universe that excrete water to catalyze cooling. They were going to die. They were going to die. They were going to die. The sun would come up and burn them to death, and they were going to die. Krell never thought his life would end this way. Surrounded by the strange humans on a Class A death planet waiting for the star to rise over the horizon and melt them to a crisp. Even the humans standing in the desert sand around him looked subdued. Usually during near-death situations, they were relatively chipper, but this was different. They knew they were going to die. They were going to die. Captain Veer gave a sigh. Knew that we shouldn't have trusted that little scab, he muttered, looking up towards the sky where the troop transport had finished, carrying with it their merchandise and conniving Tesseraki pilot, probably laughing gleefully to himself about the stupidity of the trustingly naive humans. The darkness was so profound out in the desert at night, though the stars overhead were particularly striking. The captain asked, Krill, how far are we from the sanctuary? After calming down as much as he could, he started calculating with one of his 4 cordic spheres. Suddenly, Krill felt himself sink towards the sand. This was hopeless, and the planet's magnetic field made their communications ability almost non-existent. How far? 40 units? In miles, please. America still hasn't switched to the metric system. A quick calculation. 25 miles. A sudden shift in the group, and he looked up to find a confusing sight. The humans looked almost hopeful, glancing around at each other. The captain grinned. That is great news. Krill stared at him in disbelief. 25 miles, Captain, and only 7 hours before the sun comes up. We have no chance. A bark of laughter escaped the humans. A cheer rose up. What was happening? Anyone here ever run a marathon? The captain asked. The humans' cheering died down and there was a pause. The captain frowned. Anyone want to run for their first time? Silence. Some of the humans started to analyze their shoes. Others suddenly seemed to spot something very interesting in the distance or in the sky. Some started to make the sounds that Krill came to know as whistling. Krill stared on in confusion, trying to meet the eyes of the surrounding humans, but having no success, since they suddenly seemed to have forgotten he and the captain were standing there. "I'm sorry, what is a marathon?"
It's a sort of tradition we have. Supposedly, after the final battle between the Athenians and the Persians, an Athenian soldier ran over 25 miles back to Athens to tell of the victory. Before he died.
Krill blinked in horror.
Tradition? Yeah, they do it all the time back home.
So, a few of you just give up your lives to run a race? I thought sleep was enough to meet death, but now you just die out of tradition as well?
Laughter shook the sound around him. No, thousands of people come to participate, and no one usually dies. Most people are up and walking after about an hour or two, if not directly after.
Krill stared at the humans in a mixture of awe. The captain rubbed the back of his neck, returning to his question from before.
I suppose I could do it.
Yeah, send the one-eyed, one-legged cripple to run for our lives, one of the humans commented sarcastically. Another one stepped forward. I could go. The captain shook his head.
I may have one leg, but that just means I can't feel pain in it. Not to mention I used to run when I was younger.
Used to being the key point here, someone muttered.
I heard that,
the captain snapped. Oh, there was less malice in his voice than one might have supposed. Krill sometimes did wonder about that. In most species, cultures, the crippled were weeded out in order to preserve the race. But these humans were odd. Losing a limb seemed to have the opposite effect, and if you could function with a missing limb, the humans were even more impressed. He wondered if it wasn't some sort of primitive form of dominance. The more scars you had, the more fights you had survived, which made you the strongest. The captain dropped his bag to the ground and began pulling off his jacket. Krill shook his head. "Captain, it's too cold out."
"I'll warm up."
Krill stared on in confused fascination as the man proceeded to strip off his outer layer until he stood in nothing but his undershorts and socks. The other humans laughed, whistled, and catcalled, already being back to their oblivious selves. Did they not understand how dead they were? They were alone, waiting for sunrise of a Class A death planet. This was no time to be laughing at partial nudity. The captain struck some sort of pose, earning cheers before motioning to one of the other men.
"Your shoes."
"But Captain,
Shoes, Lieutenant. I'm not running 25 miles in combat boots."
Reluctantly, the other man gave up his shoes and handed them to the other man. The group grew quiet and began pulling out supplies, putting together a small bag of water and food. The captain stood on the outskirts of the group, stretching his flesh leg before checking the functioning of the robotic one. Both seemed to be working seamlessly. His teeth clattered and he began hopping in a circle. The man really had gone mad. The lieutenant with his missing shoes approached him from the side. You better hurry, Captain. I set a watch for you. You should have 7 hours to make it, but it will get hotter as the sun approaches." The captain nodded with a sort of surreal optimism. He began his run, letting off a whoop into the night as if he were challenging the sun itself. Humans were reckless like that. They believed they could beat anything. It was an almost beautiful thing to watch as the human grew smaller and smaller against the horizon. His footing was sure and seamless despite his injury. As a medic, Krill could almost see the cords of muscle contracting and lengthening under the skin. Despite its awkward appearance, the human really was graceful when in his element. Were they going to die? He wasn't thinking that 4 hours later, when the sky began to lighten, it was barely perceptible, but he could feel it, and he could feel the heat of the approaching sun already beginning to warm him. The humans could feel it too, and they began taking off their jackets, looking towards the horizon where their doom was fast approaching. The jokes were sparser now, as were the smiles. He could sense the tension on them as hormones in the air. Adrenaline. The presence of this potent poison, even as small as it was in the air, made him feel ill, and he had no idea how the humans survived straight injections into their system. The sky grew brighter. The heat was around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 Celsius now. The humans appeared comfortable, and so was he, but anything above 75 Fahrenheit or 24 Celsius, and he would begin to wilt. The humans told him they could withstand temperatures up to 100 plus degrees Fahrenheit or 38 Celsius for short periods, but not very comfortably. He could tell when the heat increased because he felt his body shutting down. At least, he would die first. In an act of recklessness and pointless kindness, the humans used the rest of their remaining water to cool him. Not like it would matter, they were dead anyway. Hour 5 rolled by and he was sure they were dead. He was fading quickly as the heat grew to around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 Celsius. The humans frantically fanned him from all sides, trying to keep him alive. In a sort of delirious haze, he felt a sense of attachment to these strange creatures who had taken him in despite the divide between species. That's when they heard the sounds of the engines. Looking up into the sky, they caught sight of the transport fast approaching, and a great cheer rose into the air. He couldn't believe it. It took a few more minutes at nearly 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 Celsius before the ship landed, and he was quickly carried inside by a mass of cheering humans, the door shutting behind them with a screech. He was enveloped in cool bliss, enough to finally lift his head and look around, annoyed that the humans seemed relatively fine, despite sheens of sweat and a few headaches and, of course, the captain. He sat hunched under a reflective emergency blanket with an ice pack to his head. His prosthetic leg was gone and his other foot was a mass of blisters. His upper leg was a mass of raw skin where friction had rubbed it away, but he was grinning. He must have seen the odd look on Krill's face. He gave him a wink.
Told you. Easy. We humans do it all the time.
Heck, you humans are crazy, Krill said, using one of those new words the Marines tried to teach him since he had joined the ship. Heck seemed an appropriate response instead of the other phrases like excrement or intercourse that the humans were regularly using for all sorts of situations and phrases. He shook his head in amazement and fascination. The humans really were indestructible. Of course, he may not have thought that later on if he had watched the captain limp piteously back to his room, squeal like a girl when the shower water touched his chafed skin, all before flopping into a bed to sleep a continuous 13 hours. That part would be conspicuously missing from the story. A story that told of a one-legged, one-eyed human who ran 25 miles or 40 kilometers in almost no clothes during heat ranging from 40 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 5 to 32 degrees Celsius on a Class A death planet in under 6 hours, all to save his crew. And so, they did in fact not die.